Hi, welcome to the Divine Insight Show. Thank you so much for joining us wherever and whenever you're doing so. There's no accident that you're here. Something brought you here today, just like the wonderful guest and friend that I've got joining me today, Rebekah Muir.
Hello.
We're going to be talking about the divine presence and the various modalities that you use in order to help yourself and the people that you work with to get there. And we were talking before we started about, there's this knowledge that we might have or belief that we have intellectually about, hey, we're all sort of spiritual in nature. Science is starting to get to the point where we can recognize that we have an etheric body. So we can sort of understand intellectually what that means, that we have this capacity, if you will, but we don't always actually experientially feel it or know how to get there. And so I'm so excited to have you on to talk about that, because obviously as the Divine Insight Show, that's the goal. We want to provide, the goal is really to provide transformational tools that people can use and utilize in their daily lives. And I think you do that so well. That's why I wanted to have you join me. You're welcome.
Thanks for inviting me here. I'm super happy to talk about this because it's, I recently realized that it's like the core of what I'm about. So it took me a minute. Actually, it's funny because we have a shop that we both work at, and they were asking us to synthesize that. And I'm like, what do? I do X, Y, Z, A, B, C. And I'm like, actually, what I do really is focus in on divine presence, both within me and all around me. And I help my clients to do the same. And all these modalities are like stepping stones to that. A little bit about the journey for that wasn't always about, I couldn't always feel it. So this is what we want to talk about. It's like some people have that belief of they might know there's a divine presence, but they can't feel it. For me, I didn't even know there was. I went through a long period of time not knowing that, not being able to blindly swallow it, because until it made sense to my rational mind, I really I couldn't get down with it, to be quite honest. So I struggled with that for my whole life until maybe 5-6 years ago, when I had, and I was on a spiritual path, but I was always a little bit shaky on it. I was like, are you really there? It was like,
so God, you were like questioning the
my
existence.
whole life. So,
well, I can really relate to that as somebody who, I thought I was atheist for the longest time. And then it was a stepping stone to be like, well, actually, some of the experiences, if I look back at my life, would tell me otherwise, that there was some presence that was supporting me and helping me in ways that I just wasn't aware of or conscious of. So I think that's really fascinating. And so can we talk a little bit about, first a little bit about your background? What led you, because you weren't from the U.S.
I'm from Nova Scotia. So that, is a little bit of a unique place to be from, I guess. There's not, if you meet Canadians, mostly you're meeting them from Toronto or whatever, but got here and growing up, I've been a musician my whole life, professional musician. So this is all stuff that I've done in the spiritual realm. I've been doing, but I was doing as something that I was just doing because I loved it, not as a career. So the last few years have shifted. But growing up in Nova Scotia, I had musician parents, so they were super progressive thinkers, really creative people. And I was exposed, and Canada just in general, right? It's like a really progressive, really nice place. It really is. So I was exposed to the Christian religion, and my father at the time was atheist. He had had an unsavory experience as a child with his religious upbringing, basically, and was just kind of like, that stuff doesn't make sense or whatever. That's like the tip of the iceberg there.
Sure.
But, for me, I was always exposed to this person that I love and respect dearly, who's like a god to me and is a good man, doesn't believe in God. This person who I love and respect dearly, who's like a goddess to me, does believe in God. And they were both like, yeah, you can believe whatever you want. So I know that that's a really free, unique way to grow up in the 1980s and 1990s. And I did struggle with it. I remember going to church and then still questioning. You go to church and I went to a really nice church, like everyone was so nice, but I remember just in the sermons I would hear things like, "Those who do not believe will be condemned," and I was like, "Daddy!" You know, it was such an internal struggle for me from the time I was little, and I just never was able to be like, okay, they say to believe this, I'm just going to believe it. My mind never worked that way. So even I desperately wanted it to. And some days I'd be like, I believe in God. Okay, good. But then there's like that nagging voice in the back of my head that was like, but what about this, this, and this? Like, you gotta work this out in your mind. So my whole life I was kind of doing that. And you know, I studied Buddhism. I lived at a Buddhist retreat center for a while when I was in my late teens. And, you know, I studied all these religious studies and was just always looking for that thing to make life make sense. It needed to have meaning. It needed to not be a cosmic accident. And of course, now I laugh at myself because even though I'm a witch, I find myself using more and more like Christian terminology all the time. But basically, there was a turning point in my life where I finally got what I would perceive as a miracle. And I've talked about this in a lot of other shows. So if you've seen me before, I'm repeating myself, but maybe you just need to hear it again too.
Well, I mean, this is new for my
new for you, right?
audience, and so I'm really excited to hear about it. But too, I have a follow-up question too.
Oh yeah.
Well, you use the term, right? You identify as a witch, and I think people would be really.
It's also weird for me to say that on some level.
And I think that's okay because it's sort of like it's an identity that has been very much misunderstood in movies. You know, there's the occult mentality, which would make a lot of people believe that you must present in a certain way.
I'm quite uncomfortable with it, honestly.
Okay, yeah. So we'll talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about what that means for you.
Sure. I think that the way I do my whole spiritual journey is a little bit different than the way most people associate with the term witch. But for me, I'm an astrologer. So I'm very attuned to the movement of the planets and the changing of the seasons, which is for Western astrology, which is what I do, very very relevant, right? So and I'm also Celtic blooded, and I'm very connected to my Celtic heritage. So I mean, people are like, you look like an elf, and I'm like, I know. So I'm really drawn to I've gotten it a lot actually, but I'm drawn to the Celtic. I'm drawn to everything Celtic, and so Celtic spirituality has pagan roots, and I'm certainly not. It's weird to say most witches or Wiccans or whatever would say that they're pagan. I believe in everything as one, so I don't think of myself as pagan, but so I'm really drawn to the Celtic spirituality, which is, and I'm drawn to enchantment and magic, and that's why I think, and I'm an astrologer, so I'm like, I love ritual. It's so powerful. So I'm a witch. We meditate, we make pretty candles, we put our intentions down, we manifest, but it's all love and light. And of course, most people, Wicca is a new religion. So it's like being reconstructed basically from whatever they can find. And that's even within the last few decades. So no one really knows how it used to be. It's always been probably like smaller groups of people with their own practices and whatever, just connecting to nature, connecting to the force, right? Which is what we're all trying to do that through whatever religion. But I just am really enchanted with some of that Celtic energy and that earth-based spirituality energy and all of that. So I identify, I guess, as sort of a witch, but I still feel a little bit weird saying that. I've been owning it a little bit more lately, but I don't want people to get the wrong idea. I'm not casting negative spells on anybody or dressing all in black or anything like that. And there are people that identify as witches that have that are much more in touch with the shadow. And that's cool too, but it's just, you know.
Well, it was interesting when I was traveling in Bali, and they practice a very unique form of Buddhism there than any other Buddhist practice in the world, and they full-heartedly believe in white and black magic, and the true, you know, when we think about the yin and the yang, it's like, you know, we ignore the shadow aspects, and oftentimes that can be to our detriment. When we look at some part of ourselves with judgment or fear, you know, then we can really hold ourselves back from our true empowerment. And I think when I feel about what you're talking about. It's really like we're so drawn to experiences and stories and movies about using our powers, right? Accessing our true power and the mystical nature in which we all really are, whether we believe in any given organized religion or God or not. We all have this innate capacity to have this presence, as we've talked, been sharing, the divine presence in our lives. And how does that work for you in the work that you do with people? And I guess maybe if I'm not asking this in a way that's useful, but I'm sort of thinking about it from a practical level for people who are interested in learning more about how they can access some divine presence in their life to get maybe that next level up to their spiritual empowerment.
Yeah, so I think that it's going to be different for each person, and I'll share some actual practical tips, of course, in a minute about that. But one thing that I do think is important that I don't want to glaze over is the fact, like, how I got to where I knew there was a divine presence, right? And so, because for me and for a lot of other people, there might be a block around, like, if you don't really know that for sure, it's very difficult to let go, trust, and receive. And so you can read about it, you can hear about it, you can be threatened about it, you can be told, you can be enchanted by it even, and like want to believe, but if it doesn't make sense to you on some level, it's going to be hard for you to really open to discover it. So that was where I was. You know, one of my dearest friends in New York City, my friend Kara, I remember we were living together when I was going through, and when I had my big miracle that I'm going to tell you about in a minute. And she's like, yeah, ever since I was a little girl, I just could always, I was tapped in, I could feel it. And I wasn't that way. Like, I didn't have that gift. And I recognize, like, a lot of people do. Maybe you just know innately there is this presence, but I am so type A. I was like, I've got to figure this out. Let's crunch some numbers here. Like, it was literally like that. So, even though I've meditated for years and I prayed and I lit my candles and all the things. So I was going through a really tough time, super dark. And, you know, I have a history of PTSD, and every few years it seems to jump up and bite me in the ass. And this was like maybe 6 years ago. And I was like, it was just really dark at that time for me. Even though I'm like a bright sunny, I don't like dark, I don't like shadow. I'm very optimistic. I'm like, what is this? I hate this. And I was just praying, and I've had moments in the past too where I've been angry at God. I'm like, just throw out like 100 spiritual books on my bookshelf and be like, screw you, you need to show up. So I was I was angry, I was praying, I was like, I cannot do this anymore. Like, this is really dark, and I need you to step in and show me that you're here in a way I can know and feel, because I cannot do this anymore unless I know that. And if I know you're here, then I can take anything.
Right.
If I know that, even if I can't understand it all with my tiny human mind, if I know, then I can let go and trust and deal with whatever comes. You know, if I know there's a higher meaning, I don't have to understand it, but I need to know. So then a few days later, I got a text message from a random number. I should have grabbed my phone before we got on here. But basically it said everything I needed to hear. It was like, hi, you know, I'm not a stalker, but this is just a random number. And I wanted to tell you that you're beautiful and that God has a plan for you, and you're way stronger than you think, so you can never give up. And I was just like, what? Like, I was driving home from a gig in the middle of the night, you know, and I got this text message. And I even asked my friends, I'm like, did you set this up? Like, you know, and nobody did. It was like a random number from Connecticut. And to me, that was enough. For whatever reason, that did it for me, because the statistical odds of somebody, even, and that's God working through somebody, that's the force working through some teenager in Connecticut who can't spell, that decided to like send a random message, right? But so for me, after I had that, like, all of my anxiety disappeared. I was just crying with relief. And I was like, the statistical odds that could happen, that person in that moment could decide to say those exact things that I needed to hear and randomly type my number, is just, there's no way.
Yeah, you couldn't believe it.
There's just no way. And I don't know why it didn't happen sooner, because it's certainly not the first dark night of the soul I had, but maybe it was just like, that's how dark it was, and the divine knew it had to step in. But ever since then, it's been a deeper journey of so even then, it wasn't like I could feel God's presence in me, but I was like, there was a certain knowingness where I could relax enough to get to that next step. And so what I tell people if they want to connect, and most people aren't as disconnected as I was. Most people that I work with kind of already seem to, they're like, yeah, I know there's something.
Right.
But if you are as removed from it or as in your head about it as I was, you have to ask for help. And you have to ask for it to show up. And then you have to sometimes wait. It's just, and be open. But the thing is,
So
it
true.
will show up in a way that you'll be able to accept. Because here's the thing, I'm like, God knew that I needed a text message. Like, God knew that, like,
Right.
seeing 444 on a license plate was, like, not going to do it for me. You know, I was like, I need something way more, like, epic than that. And something really, like, rational, linear, clear.
Yeah, you can't be confused when you see the words on the screen, right? It's not an interpretation issue. It's like, there they are right in front of you, and you can't deny it.
Well, I mean, and for somebody else might have still been able to say, coincidence, but like the divine will know what it is that you need to push you past, for you to know, to push you over that threshold. And so, once I was there, everything's shifted, right? And so it doesn't mean that everything's instantly solved, but there's that, it's the peace of God. It's funny, so much Christian terminology just floods back over me now, and I'm like, oh, I get what they're saying now. Like, right. Peace of God be with you, right? It's the peace of God. You're just like, oh, okay, cool. It's all, there's a greater hand. It's all being taken care of, and I just have to ask and trust and be guided. And so then there are all these other processes. I love astrology. It helps me kind of, energy healing is amazing, but prayer and meditation are like they're free, and they're like the two most powerful things for me personally, because you're asking, you're consciously connecting, and then you're listening. Because I also think that, because God's not just outside you, it's like you are, like, all of this matter is just energy, the densest manifestation of energy, right? So I always think of, like, the divine will come in through your heart, right? I'm like literally pointing to his back heart. But it's like your heart's a portal for the divine presence. And it's very interesting. So now, over the course of a few years since this incident has happened, and I've developed my spiritual practice and, like, stepped into a role as a guide for other people, the second I pray, I feel a very tangible energy. I feel a very tangible energy. I never would have been able to say that 5-10 years ago, but now I'm like, come Holy Spirit. And I'm like, like, I feel myself connect up here and down. It blows my mind. And I know I'm not making it up, because you can't just, I could never blindly swallow anything. So,
well, it's funny about us and the human experience, is one to have, part of the reason I believe we came to incarnate was to live experientially. To feel things, and we have become in many ways disconnected from our bodies, disconnected from our hearts. And you made such a great point, and it's so easy that we forget that, it's really, when we ask, we use our voice. We ask for help. We don't have to know who we're asking help from. We just have to say it out loud. For many years, I never knew any specific guide that I spoke with. It was very easy for me to connect with someone when I was working on them as a client, but it was always really difficult for me to connect directly with the spiritual entity that I knew was here for me specifically. But what I did know was that, like you said, God is working through the people, like the pawns. If I get out of the driver's seat and say, God, please work out my day in a way that's easy for me, and I would really appreciate it, because I'm stuck or I'm not feeling it today. Please do this for me, and God will. Whether you believe in a personified deity like Christian faith does, that has sort of, masculine features, which always fascinates me. I'm like, how did this person that we're projecting this image of a masculine entity have, human emotion? It never really made sense to me. But what I also know is that, much like, a fingerprint, our spiritual paths are unique to ourselves, right?
Amen.
And it can and it can be, and it's so true that, it's something that I believe is important to practice. that you say, okay, I'm going to set the intention every day to do something that's going to help my conscious awareness of God in my life. It can be 5 minutes, it can be 15 minutes, it can be 2 seconds at a stoplight where you're like, help me because I'm losing it.
Yes.
Right?
That's a powerful prayer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've curled up literally at the foot of my altar and been like, help me.
Yeah.
But I've never not gotten help when I've asked for it. So that's really amazing. And what you're saying is so powerful, and it is the root of my work. So astrology, energy healing, it's all great, right? But the biggest, most important thing is that I can make people understand, even with all the fun witchy stuff I do, right? So people will come to me and ask me to bless their candle. I'm like, you have to learn that you have the authority to do this yourself.
Yeah.
It's not more special or more powerful when I do it. Like when you say it is done, it is done. And there's a process for you to learn and trust that. It's all about trust.
Yeah.
In the beginning, you don't have the trust, right? So after I got my text, then I had trust, but it still came a process after that for me to be able to still find and trust the feeling of that presence within me. And for me, a lot of it is external validation too, right? Even starting as an energy healer, I would be doing stuff and I always thought, well, if you're psychic, it must be like this huge, amazing experience that you have. And then it was never like that for me, sometimes, but mostly not. And then I'd have clients say, oh, I felt exactly this thing. And it would be exactly what I was doing at that exact moment. So then I was like, oh, I just felt like I was making that up. But, you know, apparently I wasn't. So it's a process. So you do allow yourself to practice, but the more you sit on your meditation cushion and the more you allow and prayer is, even if that word is loaded for you, then don't use it. Talk to God. You can say, or talk to the force. I'm like really hardcore in all of my meditations and my events and stuff of, I'll always go through like naming like 5 or 6 different words for God. So I can make sure that I got everybody. I'm like higher self, the force, the universe, divine mother, divine father, Holy Spirit.
I'm like, sort of half Southern. Mine's like all y'all.
All y'all.
All y'all from wherever you are, you know. And so my faith, which is really where this comes from as well, is that I don't really have to know. It's my desire that comes through my prayer. And, you know, using your voice is your prayer. Every time you use your voice, because of the resonance in the physical realm, you are in fact praying, and you're creating change in your world with your intention. And I love what you said about, you know, you are the most powerful creator in your life when you take responsibility for it and act on it and decide that you want to do that. And you claim it. Yeah.
It's a process, right? Because in the beginning, you're not going to be sure. But you'll become more sure that when you do it, you test it out and you begin to see. And the other thing too is I believe in asking for signs, right? So if you're having doubts, you just ask, be like, please show up in my life in a way that I can accept. Please show up in my life in a way that my rational mind can swallow. Please help me to feel your presence. And help me to feel it. I need to feel it, right? And
I also ask that it be shown to me in a way that I can easily understand.
Yes.
So that acceptance is good too, in a way that I can accept is essentially the same thing. It's like, okay, because I'm stubborn, I need it to be showing up for me in the form of synchronicities.
Sure.
Right? Through other people. All of a sudden, if I get my greater sense of self and awareness and feeling, I'm like, I need to go over here, and I'm not exactly sure why. But as soon as I go there, that's the thing that I needed to see that day. So it is, like you said, it's a practice that you just become more fluent in with time and practice. Right?
You get excited about it because once it starts popping, you're like, oh, this is so good. And you're just gonna, like, I use it like I use butter on toast, like every day. Every time I have a doubt pop up, I'm asking, please, like, you know, even like, come Holy Spirit. This is like new for me, all this weird Christy, because it's the energy of those words, right?
Yeah, those words.
And so it
feel
used to not be how I would
yeah.
pray, and it's evolving. Even the last, like, I am a witch, right? I love astrology, but I'm like, Christ, like, the energy of that word feels good for me. The last week I've been using it, and it has a powerful impact on how I feel, and that's how I know it's shifting energy for me. But it's a different word for everybody, which is fine. So it's whatever gives you that feeling. But you'll notice that you can begin to interact and have a relationship with this energy, and it's actually inside you as well. So you're not just praying to like an external force, but so it's like this dance between taking responsibility for your life, for your vibration. Like, you show up, you do whatever you can do to shift your energy, right? Law of attraction. And then grace, the rest is grace. So you just lean on the force, right? Please help me, please show up for me. And it starts to in these like really interesting ways that you wouldn't have. It's usually not in a way you could predict, right? I love Dr. Joe Dispenza's teachings for that. He's like, that's how you know, because it's the unknown. It's not coming from the past. It's coming from something greater than the past. It's like an infinite force of love. I love calling it the force, because that feels, I don't know, it just feels good to me. But it begins to show up, and you're like, I can have a dialogue with this. I can have a relationship with this energy. And you don't feel so powerless. Like, you feel you're a participant, right? It's really magical. It's really cool.
Well, I was thinking about, when would somebody believe that it's time for them? And I'll give you an example. Like, the sort of symptoms, for lack of a better term, that you would be experiencing in your life if you're not connected to your own force are going to be not passionate about your life. That's a basic one. Feeling despondent, sad often, feeling depressed often, feeling disconnected from other people, feeling isolated. All of these things,
fearful and afraid, stressed, anxious, like all the time.
But that's not our natural state, right? That is not our natural state. Is peace, love, and connection, which is the opposite of all of these things that I was talking about. So, and it's all available for you right now.
Yeah, exactly. So what you're saying, that's when somebody would
begin because a lot of people kind of are like, well, how will I know? When should I ask for help?
Well, when do you feel like you need help? Ask for help all the time. Ask for help with parking spots. Like, ask for help with everything. I had a client call yesterday for just a 15-minute reading, and he was just like, what's going on? I'm so off balance today. And the first thing I do in a reading is I say, dear God, dear force of love, be with us now in a way we can feel your presence within us and all around us. Thank you for making me a clean and clear channel. I do, and then love before us, love behind us, love to our left and right, above us, love below us, and nothing but love within us. And I quote this, and then it grounds, and you're connected. I can feel it, the client can feel it, and oftentimes they're kind of like, holy shit, like, excuse my French, but they're like, wow, that's what they needed more than the reading. And that's why people, I think, come back to me over and over again, is because they're looking for that connection, and I'm trying to teach them how to do it. But you can get, like, just because I have my little miracle text message from my big miracle text message from God now, and I have that peace in my heart, doesn't mean that I don't get thrown off balance countless times a day sometimes. So it can be something really small, but you just bring yourself back. And I tell them too, like, go to the bathroom. If you can't get away from people, go to the bathroom and just sit quietly for like 1 or 2 minutes. And
so what's this text message from God? You just said that. What is that?
So the text was when I was praying for that intervention. That text. Yeah.
I thought it was something you did for folks. You're sending them like as if you're like the tut,
Yes, of course, the tut.
Yeah, so you get the message from God.
Those are great too. I haven't had those for a long time, but there's been a couple good ones. Yeah, I don't feel like I have that much bandwidth. But I'm gonna let the tut guy take care of that.
Definitely.
It's
being open is the other component to that. It's like we can often get stuck in the place of continuing to ask, but not stopping with space in our mind to receive.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a two-part equation that
Sure.
you can ask, but you also want to say, I also am going to raise my awareness to what that might look like for me. And I
Yeah.
don't have all the answers. So maybe if I am open to that, then it'll happen. And it will, because you asked for it.
Yeah, and I think to speak to that, that's where I'm always saying, hey, we need a really big sign, like a really big one. And God knows, because it took me a little while, but the force of love did show up in my life in that way. Because the thing is, you can't always relax and trust. And that's why people are like, they're burning like constantly prayer candles, or they're just like, like it's so much anxiety, and it's trauma, because they don't have that. And so that's when you ask the forces, like, God, I don't have the trust right now. Please show up and give that to me. And I know, once you have it, then you can calm down a little bit, right? So, but yeah.
And it's like when, there's one that in particular that made me, when I realized it, when you pray for strength, you don't wake up stronger. You wake up to opportunities to demonstrate that strength in your life, right?
Yeah.
It's like, you wish.
Yeah, but you're right though, because you do want to make an effort to stay. I love Gabby Bernstein. I know that she's just has a lot of people don't know who she is or don't take her seriously because she's beautiful and whatever, but she's great. I love A Course in Miracles, and she, now I totally just got off track of what I was going to say. I totally lost it.
Oh, that's all right. So you're talking about the connection and it's gone.
It's okay. It'll be back when it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
What's the most powerful connected moment that you've ever had, if I could ask you?
Wow. Probably the most powerfully connected moment I had was when I had gone with a group of colleagues to get together over a weekend in 2012, where we would work on each other over the weekend. And during the weekend, two very big things happened. One, while I was getting my healing we would just trade off, and I was having like 10 people's hands on me in Reiki.
Wow.
I had the experience of seeing a phoenix fly into the room, and then it flew into my body, and I felt this transformation occur. And then a song came up from within me, which became an attunement to the healing process that I do on people, where I sing, and that helps clear the soul of entities and reinforce the soul's power.
Wow.
But also over that weekend,
it's pretty epic.
That was pretty big. Yeah, but that was only one, right? The second one was the friend that I went down there to visit, along with all of us, had lost her necklace in the river, and we had gone back to the house. And I got right into the shower because I just got really kind of dirty. And while I was showering, I felt really strongly that something was wrong with Susan, and I needed to help her. Just this gut feeling. And I was like, I dried myself off, got out of the shower, started walking to the kitchen, and she was halfway to me from everyone else who was in the kitchen. And I was like, Susan, what's wrong? I immediately clutched my neck like I had lost something. And she reached up, and her necklace was gone, and she had lost it. And I felt like I could see it in my head. I could see it in the river, which I thought was strange. But I said, I think I know where it is. Would you like to go get it? And she was so shocked, because she was like, you do that? You just got out of the shower. I said, no, that's fun. Let's go. I think it would be great. A lot of fun. So long story short, we went down to the river, and I got into the water, and the water was pretty, the current was pretty strong, and it was dusk. So it was very difficult to see. I took a deep breath, got underwater, and I felt like I knew where it was, but the water was about 12 feet deep. And I felt like I was over it, but I took a deep breath. I was starting to get tired. And as I was coming up from the water, I felt, I need help. And I realized that was a prayer. And right above me, 3 feet above, swirling, was a turkey vulture. And I realized in that moment that I could use the turkey vulture to help me. And I knew where it was. And in fact, I could see through the turkey vulture's eyes. I saw the necklace under a rock, and I was able to get it. And
that is nuts.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I'll show you it. I've never shown this on the show. This is one of the feathers that we were driving down from the house to the river. I had Susan stop the car because I was like, I need to go into the field. I don't know why, but I need to. And so she stopped the car, and I got out and went into the field, and I said, okay, God, show me what I need here, because I don't know why you wanted me to stop in the first place. and then I looked down, I said, oh, there it is. And I saw this, and it's a feather for those of you listening and not watching, that I found on the way down. It's a turkey vulture feather, which happened. So that, it was probably the most connected I've ever felt in my life.
That is absolutely epic. And just to speak to that story, because Travis, you are very open, obviously. I know that I heard the story about how you first discovered your gifts with a great curiosity, and like it wasn't like you always knew they were there, but everybody's won't be like that, right? So if you're expecting that yours has to be like a, you know, a phoenix rising in through you and all of this stuff, like and then that doesn't happen, it doesn't mean there is no God, right? But
right. And
like,
it's going to be specific for you in your experience. Like I needed that.
That's what you needed.
Massive, because I'm really stubborn. And for me, I've really got to get bonked upside the head to really kind of know. And so I think that's really it. And if you,
I'm just laughing at myself. I'm like, if that happened to me, I think I would be terrified, right? Which is why I got a text instead. But yeah, that's really, that is a next level amazing.
I know, it's crazy, but I can't deny, right? Susan was like, I came out of the water and I was holding it in my hand, and I knew she was just gonna, I told her she's gonna just shit, right? I was holding it and I was coming out of the water, and I was like gonna surprise her. For those of you listening, holding it up in my wrist, and she started coming to me in the water, and she had felt something in the riverbed, and she had said, oh, I think this is it, and she brought it up, and it was actually a piece of a fishing line with a weight on it. And I said, oh, that's funny, look what I found. And I was this far away, and I just opened it up, and she screamed so loud. I was going to tell her about the turkey vulture, but she scared it away with her scream, jumped on me, and it was just such a magical experience. And I think that is kind of a testament really to when you are open and connected to the collective consciousness, which is part of our divine sense of self. We are connected more to each other and earth and nature and animals than we could ever imagine possible. And it's possible for all of us when we stop and make the time to connect.
Well, now that you, like, you know, like,
yeah, I have no doubt.
Rationally, logically know that this stuff works, and you know what happened. There's no way that could have happened if it didn't happen that way. So you didn't make any of that up. Like, that's not possible. It's easy for you to be like, holy crap. So the next time you want to tap into your intuitive faculties, you're like, let's go, like, hallelujah.
What else is out there?
Right?
What else
like,
is possible?
What's up? There's not that sense of doubt, but I'm sure you're still, like, as a human being, always, like, you know, for me, constantly, I'm still expanding and learning about, you know, it's like developing all the time. You know, I'm sure in like a year I'll have so much more to share.
It's a process. There's more development there. You know, I've recently, you know, I think to your point, and something, you know, each of our spiritual processes are unique to ourselves. We have some common experiences with other people, but really, God of your understanding, to use a term from AA that I learned when I was in AA, my spiritual awakening occurred because I needed help and treatment for my alcoholism and drug addiction. But it's really that it will be experiential for you. So all of you really need to know that it's not you, and that it comes from an unconditionally loving place. So you don't have to believe in any given thing. And in fact, by doing so, you could be holding yourself back. So that's why I was so excited to talk to you today about this sort of thing, because it's so much about who I am and what I do with my coaching and teaching.
Divine insight, come on, it's the name of the show, right?
Yeah, bring it into your life. And it's so positive. So is there anything else that you'd like to share about your work? Or I also want to, of course, know how people can reach out to you and get information about you and what you do.
Yes, my name is Rebekah Muir. My company is sacredstarlight.com. You can find me on Instagram, sacred_starlight, and I'm an astrologer, so I do readings, which again, it's not about predicting. The dates are pretty awesome. I can tell something's going to happen, but I don't know what it is. So it's like a weather report, right? The more I watch it, the transits, the more I believe in them. but again, astrology is not everything, right? So it's just one thing that I do, but I do give astrology readings. I do tarot readings because everyone's always asking for those. But energy can shift and change. And this is the biggest thing too. We were originally going to talk about, you know, anything's possible. And so if someone wants a reading, you're reading current energy, but the second you tap in and ask for help and commit to change, boom, everything starts to move in these mysterious, amazing ways. So readings are not a limiting thing. It's like a very old paradigm, you know, going to a reader and saying, when is this going to happen? Or is this going to happen? It's like, well, are you going to make it happen? Are you going to connect with the force and make it happen? So I do these types of readings of looking at where you are and then what's the next step? What's the spiritual guidance to shift into a better feeling state? There's a lot of trauma healing that I'm starting to dive into that I've done with myself, and constantly like experiencing new modalities. You know, I've had a lot of panic attacks in my life, healed from those, but there are still old triggers. So, you know, exploring things like EFT, somatic therapies, havening, EMDR. I'm not certified in those, but I do actually use some of those techniques with my clients with nice results. And energy healing, of course, right? So I'm a Reiki master. I do pranic healing and also theta healing, and I use a combination of those in sessions. And what happens is when you do energy healing, you can shift. Things can feel lighter, so the connection sometimes can feel easier. You just feel better. There's a lot. It's a whole other episode. There's a lot more going on with energy healing than just that, but I still. My favorite thing that I do is prayer and meditation. And so I have a lot of meditation at Liberate Hollywood. I do every Monday night a quantum mystic meditation where we go back to the future. And so it's about manifestation, right? But it's about connecting with the force, connecting with the quantum field and the idea, the concept, and feeling the presence of infinite possibilities, and just shifting your energy and then asking for help. So it's always, I'm always tapped into that grace element, because I don't think that you have to do it all by yourself. Because we do sometimes feel stuck or plateaued, all of us, like even healers, like we're not done. Like you know, we're still doing stuff. So we just, and if you have those tools, then my goal is to empower you, so that you don't always need to go to a reader or a healer all the time, but you know, you are your greatest healer and your greatest guide, and sometimes you might need to consult somebody outside of yourself just for that comfort, or they can guide you to help you reconnect with yourself and with the force, right? So and I know that's what you do too, right? I mean, ultimately that's what we're all doing. If you find somebody that's not doing that, you should probably run. Right?
I mean, the thing is, nobody has, I mean, if somebody, I mean, I believe we're all you know, we talk about the wounded healer part, right? It's like in some ways, unless you've healed something within yourself, it's difficult to help others to do that.
Yes.
So,
I mean, none of us started this work because everything was going so great.
Right. You know? Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining me this week, Rebekah. It's been a pleasure and a joy. And again, that's sacred_starlight.com.
Yes. Or no, sacredstarlight.com, sacred_starlight on Instagram.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful week. And you've been watching or listening to the Divine Insight Show.